All right, today we're talking about how to turn a one-person consulting operation into a full-fledged business and how to become a master of getting five-star reviews online. We've got some great strategies for you on that as well. My guest today is Michael Moore. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of this show coming from Bozeman, Montana, where I'm on vacation with my family at the moment. But this is an interview that I've been trying to line up for about 7 or 8 months now, so I'm really excited about it. And of course, if you listen to my episodes every week, I get to talk to smart CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from all kinds of companies. We've had Netflix, Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, Lending Tree. Go check out the archives. Lots of great episodes in there. And of course, this episode brought to you by Rise25, our company where we help B2B businesses get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with Done For You podcasts and content marketing. And you can learn more at rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. All right. And a quick shout out to past guests on this show, Sean McGinnis of Tiger 21, who was a guest on the show and is a good friend. And I'm just a big fan of everything that he does. And he's someone who plays in the life of our guest here today, who is Michael Moore. He's the founder and CEO of M3 Networks, and they provide full service IT support to a variety of different businesses, small and medium-sized businesses, mostly around the Dallas and Fort Worth areas. And he's got quite a journey. We're going to hear all about it. But first of all, Michael, I love to hear how people were as a kid. I remember when you and I first connected, you said that in elementary school, you made friendship bracelets, I believe it was, that you sold in school. Yes, you did tell me that. And baseball cards was another thing that you got involved in as well. So take us back to young Michael and selling friendship bracelets and baseball cards.
Well, young Michael was very mischievous. So if I was in a classroom, I was trying to find a way to get out of the classroom. And that might be climbing the walls in the bathroom or making my fellow students laugh. But one of the things I found is I love to do or build things or sell things. And I'd literally bring baseball cards to school, and other people valued like, oh, look, I've got a Pete Rose card, or I've got, a Ricky Henderson card or a Mark McGwire card or whatever it was. But I was like, I've got this card. I'll trade you this card for that card. I really enjoyed the exchange of that. And it was my first interest in like, how can I make money? How can I exchange this thing for that thing? And the same thing with friendship bracelets. But the friendship bracelet angle was, even at an early age, it got me interacting with girls. Hey, look, I may not be what you consider cute at this time, but I have something of value for you. Do you want a friendship bracelet? I've spent all night making these, and they created a lot of good conversations. And I remember with friends, we would trade baseball cards for hours. And I was always trying to, I guess, win the transaction and have fun in that way.
I actually taught myself how to juggle, thinking that would be a way to connect with girls at a young age. I don't know what I was thinking when I was 9 or something like that. All right. So, and were you also the type that was like fiddling around with computers? Is that how you eventually got into IT services?
Yeah, for sure. So my grandfather, John Moore, took me to the Infomart, which is a place in Dallas, big building where they, got hosting of internet devices and all sorts of things and data centers and all that now. But back then, they would host little computer conferences on the weekend, like what is C++ and what is a boxed video game? Because this is back, late 80s, early 90s. And he piqued an interest in me that has existed still to this day. And I remember my first love in computers was not breaking them down and taking them apart and doing things like that or modifying them. It was really, how can I hack this game so that I can win? That competitive aptitude existed even in that space. So I remember the first little game that I played on a computer was called Hardball. And I taught myself, I think it was like basic DOS commands at like 10 years old, so that I could change the scoring system of the game and so that I could make the pitcher throw faster. So like the pitcher would throw in that game 90 miles an hour. I made him throw through computer code like 140 miles an hour, and he would strike out everyone. So that was an interest that my grandfather piqued in me, and then he encouraged. I remember he bought me my first computer, which was like a 386. And, it just, whether it be Windows or just any of the graphics or sounds or taking things apart, I had an interest in it at a really, really young age.
And how did you combine the interest in like selling baseball cards, selling friendship bracelets, making money, and then also the IT? Were you one of these guys who figured out you could design websites for people and started doing that in high school?
A little bit. I remember there was a time where there was somebody who my parents were very focused on, we have to have dinner tonight, every single night together as a family in the family dining room. That was just like, we're going to do that 7 days a week. And I remember very specifically being so pissed off that there was something broken on the computer and I wanted to fix it, but they hired a computer guy and he repaired it remotely using like an early version of like PC Anywhere or something. And I remember thinking, I could fix like 4 things at once remotely. I wouldn't have to sit in front of them. So that was the first iteration of that thought. And then when I went off to college, I would talk to different people, whether it be professors or different people that I, worked with at Best Buy, because that was one of my first jobs, is working at Best Buy. And anyway, hey, can I help you with your computer or things like that? And I happened to live with a couple of roommates that worked with me at Best Buy, and we were part of the computer repair team. And we took that kind of knowledge and that desire to have that hobby at home, and we downloaded hacking tools and would use those hacking tools to break into different things, usually just each other's computers. And it was just a lot of knowledge building at that early and mischievous age.
And you were, I guess we'd call it kind of a gradual entrepreneur, because you were working for another company and then you formed an LLC. You had kind of a company on the side, but it was kind of like a side moonlight hustle until the economic downturn, I think around 2009, 2008, something like that. Is that right?
Well, I don't think I talked to you about my first big lesson in entrepreneurship, which was I was working for somebody in 2002. And I was like, what I believed, and I was 22, 23 years old. What I believed is I was the second employee there besides the founder. And I developed the logo and our tagline, and I had key relationships with all of our customers. But I was a young 23-year-old who didn't really know what he was doing besides he wanted to help people. And I was helping this entrepreneur that I worked with. And I was like, man, I'm part owner in this thing. And one day he just kind of got annoyed with me. I'm sure it was quite annoying at that time. And he said, I'm gonna go ahead and let you go. So I had fully believed at that time that I was part owner in a business. And then I wasn't. I was just jobless. And then I went and got a job and worked in jobs for a little while. And
pause on that. What was that like for you, that setback after feeling this sense of ownership for this company that you had helped to start, you're almost like a co-founder, and then realizing, oh my gosh, I'm an employee, I'm dispensable. He got rid of me.
Well, it taught me a lot of lessons that I've put into practice in how to treat my employees today. And just a simple example of that is when he let me go, we met for lunch at Saltgrass Steakhouse. And we never met at Saltgrass Steakhouse, so it was completely out of character. And I was like, wow, he's buying me a nice lunch. He's giving me an attaboy. This is really coming out of left field. I'm going to get some praise. I might even get a bonus. That's what I totally believed.
Your mind was a completely different place.
Yeah. And then when we sat down for lunch and we were starting to order the salad, he goes, hey, I don't see your computer. Oh, no, I didn't bring in lunch. I could just take notes or whatever you want to say, boss. He said, could you go to your car and get your computer and make sure you bring it in? And then he took that computer and moved it to him and like put it under his chair. Like, was I going to then run out the building with the computer? And I remember feeling like, whoa, you don't trust me. And you're about to tell me something. I actually, at that moment said, hey, you're not here to give me an attaboy, huh? Like, what's going on? And I'm sure in my 23-year-old maturity, I didn't handle it so well. It was written all over my face at that moment. And I just said immediately, like, make sure that you're buying lunch because it sounds like I'm about to be out of a job. And then he went right into it. He's like, yeah, I just don't know if you're the right fit. And what it's created in me in my own entrepreneurial journey and not to say that I've never done it, but your job as a boss is to not surprise these people. If somebody's not doing well or they are doing well, like, don't surprise them coming out of left field and being like, you're doing great, you're doing great, you're fired. Like,
Yeah.
don't surprise them. That's not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a kind of a breakdown in communication and communicating expectations and what you want out of the employee in the first place.
Right. And, there's a lot of moving parts in a business and we all get busy and stuff like that, but people need to know where they stand just in general. Like, hey, I think that you're doing a great job, but some people can tell that you don't believe in yourself. That might be very simple feedback. And that, the ultimate, like, I'm glad that you see that in me. What's a way or strategy that I can, impact my own self-belief? Because these kinds of things like confidence are very important, especially in things like sales and marketing. So I left that job, not of my own will. I had a lot of pride in it. And it was actually a crazy time because I was actually living in the house that also was our office. He'd got a rental house in Allen, Texas. And we put like one bedroom was my bedroom, one bedroom was like our conference room, and one bedroom was where we set up all the computers.
So you lost both your job and your housing at the same time.
At the same minute. And I was like, what do I need to do? And he's like, we just need to get out. So I like literally had to move all my stuff out that day.
Wow.
It wasn't a great experience. And I certainly was surprised by it.
So you end up, I believe, moonlighting for a number of years and then eventually working for another company. And then was there another layoff in 2008?
Yeah. So I worked a lot of different IT jobs. I felt like, okay, maybe entrepreneurial stuff isn't for me. Worked as an IT help desk person, worked as a network engineer, then worked my way up to IT director. And I was working for an oil and gas company at the time that had one client, one big client. And we had about 200 employees. So I started an LLC in 2008, which is the company I now own. And I didn't really have the confidence to step out of that really well-paying job until 2010. And I stepped out in 2010. We started to acquire some clients. And it was within 6 months of me stepping out on faith alone that complete company laid off all 200 employees. So it was just the timing was right for me. And ultimately they only had one client. So the writing was on the wall when they lost that client. And it was an oil and gas company. So oil and gas is kind of boom or bust.
And so were you thinking, I need to leave this sinking ship? Or were you just thinking, this is too risky? If they lose that client, then I would be out of a job?
Well, my first thought was I make this as a salary and they keep talking about how they might have to start shifting salaries, they weren't making it clear what was happening, but I could feel something's about to happen. They're going to lose the client or they can't find other clients, but I'm definitely going to lose employment. And I talked to my wife, who's been, my biggest support in all that we have done. And she's like, you're really good at business. Maybe you should start a business. So I started what is now M3 Networks. And we came up with the name in like a real quick 30-second conversation because we got to come up with marketing schemes. We got to do this. And whatever it was, she said, well, there's me, Stephanie, Michael, and Henry, and we're Moors. So there's 3 M's. So just call it M3. And he was like, you do networks. So M3 Networks. And then M3 Networks was born, done. And then we were off and running, making phone calls on the telephone or sending emails to people we knew to try to, people call it acquire a client. I was just trying to make friends in the community and say, hey, I do IT work. Is there anything I can do for you?
And you have said that the first 6 or 7 years, you really felt like it wasn't a full business. You weren't hiring employees. It was really kind of just you doing consulting. It wasn't until you kind of realized that you didn't want a job, you wanted to actually build a business. I'm not sure if this was lining up with your experience of going to a Robin Robbins event, which she is kind of the guru for IT services companies, helping them to build more of a full-fledged business.
Yeah. So the timing lined up almost exactly where I started to get, you know, anxious and stressed about we're clearly not growing. Why not? And I didn't know that marketing and sales were really even a thing. I thought I know a certain number of people. Well, helping those people, shouldn't those people just tell more people because we're doing good work? And we hired a couple of engineers and they were doing a great job. And I wanted to make sure that they had more opportunities in the future. And right about that time, I was probably getting letters and things like that and emails from Robin Robbins all along, but my mind was ready to see that information. And I went to a Robin Robbins boot camp in Nashville, Tennessee. And not only did I enjoy the show and enjoy learning all the things I learned, I met a few people that were in the same place. Like, I don't know what marketing or sales is, but clearly she does. And when I was there, I wasn't even certain that I was going to join her full program, but the guys that ended up having lunch and dinner with every day, they jumped in the line to join her full program. And I was like, well, I'm not going to be left out. And I jumped in the line too. And it's been learning ever since about what sales and marketing is and how to build an audience and how to really do bigger and better things for your clients and for your employees and for all of your team.
And was this one of these programs where it's 25,000 or 50,000 or something? And, it was a huge commitment. Oftentimes I've heard stories like that where people are like, I couldn't imagine. It was way more expensive than I'd ever invested in something like this before. And, somehow I just went and did it anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember the exact number, but it was like $1,500 a month or something like that. And that was more than anything that I was spending on. It was more than my house payment. It was more than our biggest customer. You could throw any amount of things that we're doing in our personal or business life, and it was bigger than all of them. But I kind of had to lean out on, faith and encouragement from others and just take that first leap. And one of the people I called was my wife. I was like, are you okay with this? She's like, it sounds like you're energetic. It sounds like this will be great for you. And so we went off and did that. And it's been exceptionally impactful ever since. But what I'd say more importantly is the next lesson I learned is just because I'm learning these things at a conference doesn't mean your employees are. Because now we're getting 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, 20 employees. And I'm coming back with excitement, but I don't really have the strategies to enable them to have the same information or the same level of excitement. And
so how do you do that? Because I experienced that. I've been participating in this 3-year program. You and I are both in EO called the Entrepreneurial Master's Program. And one of the challenges as owner is when you come back to your business, you have a bunch of ideas and you come back and you flood your team with them. So what has been or what's become your strategy for sharing those ideas with the team?
Well, number one, I learned that I take paper notes, right? It's not going to be on a computer, because if it's going to be on a computer, I'm going to send it in an email. The email is going to be too long and it's going to quickly set people off on, oh my God, he's gone to a conference, get ready, that kind of a thing. So if I take paper notes, I can typically circle or highlight 2 or 3 really impactful nuggets that when I get back to the team, I can go, here are the most powerful, impactful things that I've learned. And let me ask an open question. How do you feel about these things? And most importantly, if you feel good about these things, how can I help you? Because I'm a resource for the company. I'm a steward for the company. How can I help you impact and deliver these things to our clients or to yourself or whatever it is? And if you got 2 or 3, one of those initiatives might, go off with a 10 out of 10. One of them might be a 2 out of 10. Another one might be a 6 out of 10. But at least it's better than the first time I came back from a conference and it was like, I have 40 new ideas and we're doing them all this week. And then they just look at me like, you're insane. We're not doing any of this because we have things to do for our current customers.
Mm-hmm.
And then at this point in time, after being in that program and some others for a number of years, I'm involving them in the training. So I'm sending them to Nashville, or I'm sending them to Vegas, or I'm sending them, and they get the training in person themselves. They get to take notes themselves. And then I become a sounding board for some of the things that I've learned and can help with those things.
Mm. Now, one of the things you've implemented, which I teased at the beginning, was a strategy for getting 5-star Google reviews, online reviews.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have kind of a process around that? Talk a little bit about how you've developed that.
So we use Slack internally, and Slack is a big thing for us, and that everybody on our team works remotely. So we're in constant conversation in Slack conversation. So it was just a few years ago, 3 years ago now, that we looked up and we said, we'd like more Google reviews. We're doing a good job for our clients, but we don't really have a process to make that happen. And we started sending emails to clients being like, please give us more Google reviews. And that didn't work. I think at the time we're at like 7 or 8 Google reviews. And I said to my, sort of second and third in command at the time, I'd like to be at 100 Google reviews by the end of the year. And this was like in June. And they're like, okay, you're crazy. We have 6 or 7. We're not getting to 100. So it was clear that they weren't jumping on board and like, we're really going to dive in and create a process for this initiative. So it was one of those things that I had to take the bull by the horns. And I said, okay, here's how we're going to do it. And I think it was something only I could do because it involved using money in the company and doing things like that. And what we did is we use a system, our ticketing system, that every time a ticket is done with a customer, they have an opportunity to say, you guys did a good job or a bad job or some level of job. We embedded a code in there that says, if you can give us a Google review, we will ultimately, if you say XYZ employee did that, like Bob did a great job on this ticket, and you include his name, we're going to give a monetary donation to a charity. The charity we're supporting right now is Meals on Wheels, and we're going to buy that technician lunch. So you'll see through our hundreds of Google reviews, a lot of them say Bob or Jacob or Ovi. They're naming the technician in that. And we link that with Zapier to Slack so that every time we get a Google review, it populates in a channel we call praise. And all throughout the day, you'll see a review come in from a client, and you'll see employees saying, attaboy Jacob, attaboy Ovi, attaboy Bob, attaboy, and sending gifts in there and things like that. So there's the system. And the last piece we added to it is every time we get to 100 mark, we have a party, culture party. We go to dinner, we'll go to a Stars game, we'll go to horse races, whatever it is. And I give personally that dollar amount to every single employee. So our next number is 400, and I'll hand $400 in cash to every single employee. And what it's created for us is not just the opportunity to have that picture and be excited about getting Google reviews, but culturally, one of our core values is service first and taking care of the person on the other end of the line. And so people are constantly talking about that. Like, we got 60 more to go. And they're talking about like, how did you do such a good job with that customer? And that's really the exciting thing for me, because that can be a difficult thing to do when you move to remote, which we did in 2020.
And I definitely want to get to that. One other tidbit I wanted to ask you about is when you hire employees, you ask them, if I was a customer at your restaurant, how would you serve me well? Talk a little bit about that.
So when we were in office, we asked 2 questions. The first question was, how was the drive in today? And we always knew from that first question that we're probably not going to hire you if you said the drive was terrible, traffic sucked, and just really a complainer's mentality. And he's like, okay, we're going to do the rest of the interview because we want to be, respectful of your time and ours, but we're going to condense this. And then the second question we started asking, because we know not a lot of people have maybe had an experience in the service industry, but in IT, you got to use your brain and think, what are the different ways I can troubleshoot this? So we ask, if I was a customer at your 5-star restaurant, how would you take care of me? And so then the technician or the engineer or whomever it is that's interviewing might say, I'd first get to know you by your name, and I tell you my name. My name's Michael. Thanks for coming to our restaurant. Can I get your name? My name's Michael. Great. Our specials tonight. And you could see they start to think it out. And the people that are not going to be a fit, they almost always will just quit right there. They say, I've never been to a 5-star restaurant. Okay.
And they'll just like not be able to answer it at all.
Yeah. So if you were a waiter at a 5-star restaurant, how would you handle it? I'm not interested in going to a 5-star restaurant. So can you give me the rest of the interview? And it tells you right there, like when you get put in a difficult situation, you're just going to fold. And the people that, well, they may not even say like what kind of a restaurant. They're just like, I'm going to tell you the specials. I'm going to get to know your name. And then they'll say something like, I'm going to ask you if you're at this restaurant for any special occasion, like your anniversary or birthday. And you can see they're putting in the thought process it takes to take care of a person. Because ultimately, when you're in a service business, that's what it's all about.
That's great. I want to ask you about you actually, after you put these pieces in place, so you've grown, you've gotten employees, and you got a client that was acquiring aerospace companies. And eventually this particular client for you got to about 50% of your revenue. I think we can all see what direction this is going in.
I didn't see what direction it was going in.
Well, in retrospect now, it seems apparent, that oftentimes doesn't go so well. And also, I mean, it was 2016, which of course ended up being a tough economy. So they hired a new CFO who said, you got to cut your bills in half. Right. So that's half
by a minimum of in half.
Wow.
So to be perfectly clear, the first interaction I had with this person, I said, I'd love to meet you for lunch. I thought I was going there to provide great value and talk about how we can help. Is there any initiatives he needs help with? And I go to shake his hand at the first lunch. And he's like, I don't need to shake your hand. I don't really even need to know who you are or what you're about. I just need to know how you can cut your bill at least in half. And I was like, wow, this is going to be one of those really great lunches.
Just like the last one.
And then I asked him, what do? You play, your kids play sports? Because I knew he had, like 5 or 6 kids. And he's like, my kids are really a pain in the ass. Why don't we talk about something else? And I was like, wow, this is not going to be a fun relationship. I knew right off the bat. And then he's like, he called me that day. He's like, do you know the answer to how you're going to cut your bill by 50% or more? And it became an everyday thing, which was just a whole weight of stress. And it lasted about 6 months until he was like, the rubber has met the road. Just give me an out clause. So I gave him an out clause. They paid a percentage of their contract out. And it was like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders and of all of my employees. Like I was just covered in anxiety over that relationship. And what's crazy is once I had the weight off of me of that relationship, I replaced all that revenue, and my team did as well. We got to work in about a 3-month period.
Amazing. Wow. So,
and in the 6 months leading up to it, we were completely stagnant because we were just thinking about the weight of that relationship the whole time.
Yeah, it can be debilitating for a business sometimes to have a client that large. Now, around the same time, you had a sales and use tax audit as well. So you're going through this. What a horrible time.
Yeah. So I remember it vividly. We got the letter from the sales and use tax for the state of Texas. And it said, we estimate that you owe, it was something like $500,000. I called them and they're like, yeah, we believe you. Actually, the number is 327,000. And I knew enough about direct response marketing to know like, this is sort of a response letter that we're getting from the state. This isn't an actual number. They're just throwing out stuff that doesn't even have anything to do with actuarial tables. So I thought if I just called them and talked to them like humans, then they'd go, oh, sorry, we sent the letter to the wrong person or something. And that was not the case. And I spent about the next 13 months going back and forth with the state of Texas. And ultimately they said, you owe $12,000 is what we can find in some sales and use tax. And that was through a lot of efforts of, hey, we found one customer 5 years ago that they missed percentage of tax on invoice 4 or 5 times. I'm like, man, we did 13 months of effort to find like a couple of invoices. Couldn't we have started with this? But it was 13 months of about 25 hours a week of effort from a part-time accountant that I hired to be in my in-house part-time accountant. And at the time, MSPs were still relatively new, and their belief in the state of Texas at that time was anything that touched a computer should be taxed. And a lot of MSPs at that time believed if it was service work, i.e., labor only, like I'm just consulting to you on the phone, almost like a therapist, it's not taxable. And the state said, absolutely not, because did you virtually touch their computer? Had you physically touched it the same day? And they wanted to correlate a lot of different things. And you had to, the lesson for me is we had to get our systems a lot more clear. How many minutes did we touch the computer on site physically? How many minutes did we touch it off site? Just all those kind of really minute details. Because when you get at a state sales and use tax audit, that auditor wants to know everything. And I remember the final meeting with the state and my accountant and my part-time accountant. We all sat there and they said, here's the final number. And it was very little at this point. And I was like, here's a check. Please leave me alone.
Such a relief, I'm sure, to be done with that. Now, you said that this was the most stress you've ever experienced in your life. And I think this is probably a relevant moment to mention that you had suffered from depression and anxiety going back to, early teenage years.
Right.
And one of the things you've credited in your business to big advances in your business is actually confronting that head on and doing something about it. And it's kind of helped with the growth of the business. So you want to talk a little bit about how you've tackled that as a business owner?
Yeah. So for depression for me, whether it was something that was biological, genetic, whatever, it started to present itself after a horrific car accident that I was in. We were in a motorhome that was stopped, that was hit by an 18-wheeler, smashed into another 18-wheeler. There were 9 of us in that accident. Oof. And I was 13 years old, and my whole world just started spinning. There were a lot of things. We ended up in a courtroom case that lasted a long time because the trucking company was responsible and the state of Texas didn't have signs on that street and all kinds of stuff. But ultimately, that's the first time for me that depression really started to present because it put a lot of injuries into the family, a lot of trauma, a lot of going to see people near their death and stuff like that as a small child. And for me, I had a couple attempts at suicide at that young age. And I look at it back now and I was like, I'm going to use a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And the temporary problem was I didn't have control over my emotions in that space because I was too young to understand all the goings on of it. And as it relates to current day and all these iterations of in business, you're just going to get bombarded with stress. I mean, it's just a fact of life, whether it be the state of Texas saying, hey, you owe this money that you may or may not owe, or a difficult customer or an employee difficult situation. You're just going to get bombarded with stress. And there are a lot of things you can do about that stress and that I do. Like I work out, I pray, I meditate, all these things. But sometimes depression is just going to present itself, period. And people handle it in different ways. And for me, what happens for me in my depression is I kind of hide a bit. I'm like, I just can't deal with things. And I disappear into my own self, which is the opposite of what I really need to do. So over the last few years, through therapy and developing a deeper relationship with God that I did not have, I have started to learn that these storms are just one raindrop, right? They're not the entire storm. And that helps me understand that life is a big, long story, and there's going to be really good stuff happens and really bad stuff that happens. And like my grandfather always said, he's like, this too will pass. Life ain't always a bowl of ice cream on a wonderful summer day. Sometimes it's a really difficult situation and somebody you love, is has cancer or dies or whatever. And it's not about the situations that I've learned that have hit me, like these things or other things. It's about how you respond to them. And I think that's what creates the character in us. And I think that's what makes me a decent teacher as an employer. Like I didn't know that you're not supposed to surprise employees at Saltgrass until I had that experience, right? And then once I had that experience, I thought, it needs to be clear if I'm letting somebody go, not surprising them over a really nice meal, oh, by the way.
Yeah.
And so I don't let things like depression and anxiety surprise me. If they come, there's certain things you need to do about it. And the first thing you do is you need to start talking to somebody that you love and trust and can kind of guide you out of your own mind. And then there's a lot of next steps, whether it be talking to a therapist or stuff like that. But ultimately for me, the first step is don't hide. It's not going to help.
Yeah. Yeah. Building a routine that works for you seems to be a real game changer for you as well. Speaking of surprises, let's jump to 2020. Now, at this point, you're running an MSP, doing IT services for companies, and you start to see this COVID pandemic developing in Asia. And if I recall correctly, you felt that you needed to get ahead of it because it was going to be affecting all of your customers. So take us through what that moment in time was like.
So March of 2020, my wife and I and 2 children, we were actually on vacation in California. And we were doing the entirety of the PCH, starting in San Diego up to San Francisco. And we could start to see on the news, that was the week that the NBA, said, hey, we're going to stop the game in the middle of a game and shut down. I remember that, watching that on TV, seeing Mark Cuban kind of walk back and forth, being surprised himself, like, why are you stopping a game?
Yeah.
And I that next morning called my staff and said, we're going to work from home. It was about 2 or 3 weeks later that Texas started to be impacted in the same way that California and others were starting to be impacted by full shutdowns and the like. But, they were kind of argumentative. That first phone call, they were like, we don't need to go. It's not even happening in Texas. It's not that big of a deal. And I was like, you're working from home. Start figuring out what virtual solutions we're going to use for our clients. And then I think the most important thing I said in that moment was, we're going to give it to them for free. Like, I don't want to have the barrier of, we call the client and they're not taking it seriously. And they say, well, we don't want to work from home because it's $6 a month or whatever the solution is that they believed wasn't going to be that useful. So we went to work from home immediately. We finished 2 more days of our trip and I flew home. And there were clients that were like, we took our copier home, we took our computer, but we didn't take our cables. What do we do? And so all our techs were running around town, literally. You forgot your network cable, you forgot your power cable, you forgot your monitor.
And giving them probably in a plastic bag or something, the kind of the things that we did in those early days.
The whole 9 yards, mask and gloves and plastic bags, and had all kinds of different experiences in Texas. And some people were like, this doesn't exist, just come and get, like, overly aggressive. Like, I want to hug you right now just to prove this doesn't exist. And then other people are like, I just leave it in my mailbox. I don't want to touch any of it. So there was a lot of nuance in that time that we sort of had to take care of ourselves and our own employees, but also understand what are the needs of our clients. Are they going to work from home? Are they fighting working from home? And I think ultimately 100% went to work from home in about a 30-day period.
Wow.
And at this point, we've got a lot of clients and a lot of people to take care of. And it was quite an experience.
Wow. Wow. And how did it affect the business? Because there were, many businesses where, like, they lost clients or, no new clients were signing up for a period of time. And then eventually it got busier. Sounds like it was fairly stable for you.
It was not only stable, but in the first week that I was back home, we had 6 new clients. I mean, our phone was just ringing off the wall saying, hey, how do I do work from home? How do I get a laptop? There are no laptops in stock. So we were trying to stock as many devices as we could, power cables, laptops, because the world was shutting down. And so the phone was ringing off the wall of, do you have anything? Like just the same as people started to run out of bread or toilet paper, certainly they were running out of computers. So we were very lucky in that we were in high demand at that time. And we started being of assistance to people in the way that we could. And then also I started to get a lot of calls from television stations. So it was the first time that I started doing a lot of media.
Hmm.
I remember one of the first media like tours I did with a gentleman from the FBI named Brett Leatherman, who was at that time working in the Dallas office of the FBI, and they wanted to pair a local IT company, us, up with an FBI guy. So you had two parts of the story, and we did song and dance on TV. We did it in webinars. We were just trying to make people aware of really basic things at that time, like what Zoom is, what two-factor authentication is.
This sounds like the makings of a great 80s buddy comedy.
Right. It was
an FBI agent.
Yeah, it was just an interesting time because, so many people were like, I don't know what Zoom is. I just keep hearing people say Zoom on TV. So we were literally having to educate, like, you can do a meeting online. You don't have to just do it in person, really basic things. And a lot of the things that are common language now that people say, oh yeah, I've got two-factor authentication, or I use Zoom, or I'd say 90% of the people in 2020 were like, I don't know what any of that stuff is, you techie guy.
It's quite a journey for you. And what was it like too? Because, I think when we talked before, you said that IT and cybersecurity is like the road system, and people don't want to deal with repairs. They just want the road to work. But you were basically like a hero to them. You allowed these businesses, many of which were probably really petrified that they might go under or not be able to work at all. You allowed them to continue to work through this global pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, they were all in that time very grateful, and it was just a really good time for us as the people who preach the gospel every day of cybersecurity. It was like, oh, us IT people are valued, and it wasn't anything about ego. It was like, we love to get this information in your hands, and we're excited that you want to accept this information. So it was really good for us, and our business has grown ever since. And I think the most important part, sort of culturally, when we start to talk about cybersecurity, like cybersecurity in 2019 was like, I don't even know what that word means. And it just sounds like you're talking about technobabble. And now people understand there are basic disciplines that you need to do. It doesn't mean they understand what they are, but they typically understand that I need to go find a resource to help me with this. And unfortunately, we're still in a space that people forget very fast. Once something bad has happened to them, it doesn't take very long for the human mind to say, let's erase it. It's probably not going to happen to me again.
Yeah.
I was in one car accident. It's never going to happen again. I'm not going to wear my seatbelt. It's like, okay, maybe just wear the seatbelt. So with cybersecurity, we get a call almost every week from somebody who's had a horrific experience. Like, we got a call recently of a prospective client that had an IT company they were working with. They weren't doing a really great job, and they had $4 million stolen out of their business.
Wow.
That was the beginning of the hack. And so when we got in and we started taking a look, it was like, we need to stop this hack. Do we have your permission? And even then they were still like, well, I don't know. Is this real? The money's gone. It's very material at this point. And unfortunately, a lot of people have to experience these painful events before they truly stick to the consistent cybersecurity discipline, so they don't have those terrible events that happen to them.
Yeah. Good advice. Michael, this has been great. I want to wrap up with my gratitude question. So I'm a big fan of gratitude, especially expressing gratitude to those who've helped you along the way. And a lot of times people will kind of default to mentioning their family, their team, which of course are important, but I also love to hear stories about peers, contemporaries, others in your field, however you want to define that, who you would want to thank for just helping you in your journey.
Well, I want to give a lot of gratitude and thanks to two people. The first one's a contemporary, is a gentleman named Stephen Taylor, and he owns Leading IT. So technically a competitor, but I met him at that Robin Robbins event all those years ago. And Stephen, he's had his own set of difficulties in life, like we all do. But Stephen's advice and love for me has been constant of, keep pushing forward, man. We got this. And so Stephen Taylor, And then number two, I've got a lot of gratitude for one of my mentors, Mark Moses, who has wrote the book Make Big Happen and is constantly reminding me, somebody, I work with him directly, and we support their organization, CEO Coaching International, and the whole audience that he works with, like that you have to know what you want first, and then you got to know what you need to do about it, right? These make big happen questions. And I've never had a conversation with him that I didn't learn something. And he's such a laser focused guy that it's so inspiring to be around.
Michael, this has been great. Where can people go to learn more about you and M3 Networks?
Yeah, so just go to m3networks.com, take a look at our company, and I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook and all the socials, but you can find them there on m3networks.com.
Excellent, Michael. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.